Good morning. Today is the 4th of Kislev, the 17th of November. And we're going to start Derech Mitzvotecha, the ways of your commandments, is the name, the way of your commandments, the path of your commandments, from the third Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek. I once read that most of what he has here he wrote by the time he was bar mitzvah, but not necessarily everything. And he, the way he structured this is he goes basically according to the order of the mitzvahs of the chinuch. The chinuch is one of the enumerators of the mitzvahs, the 613 mitzvahs, but not like the Rambam who did it according to some order that we're not sure, and Rasag who did it again according to something that looks like he goes by what he thinks are the most basic ones, and then even though there is no such thing really, but there is. The chinuch went according to the order of the parshas. So for the most matter, that it seems like that's the order here, but it's not even that. He quotes from the chinuch a lot, but he's not necessarily going according to his order either. So I don't know if there is an accepted understanding of what the order here is. In the beginning, it looks like it is because it starts with pru or vu, start with fertility, being fruitful and multiplying. Then it goes to milah, to circumcision, and then it goes to gidanasha, which seems to be the order of the first three mitzvot, if you go according to the Torah. But then he skips now to Shin Pei Vav suddenly, which is the 388th mitzvah in the Rambam, in the Sefer Mitzvos, and it's Tzizit suddenly. So it's not clear exactly what his order is. In any case, what his purpose is to explain each mitzvah according to our psychological work, our inner work inside. And to do this, he first of all almost always quotes the Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria. So you have to get used to the fact that this is a style that's very common in Chasidut. That first you quote Kabbalah and then you explain what Kabbalah said. So the beginning is difficult. And so for the beginning, I actually am going to use their translation. We'll see how they translate. I guess they didn't really translate it. They just transliterated it. Yeah, you can see. Okay, so let's start. La'asot mitzvah tzizit. So the commandment of tzizit. Tzizit. La'asot tzizit al kanfei ksuto. The commandment is to make a tzizit. Tzizit is a word in Hebrew, not just the name of a mitzvah. It comes from the word tzitz, something that peeps out, right?
That what?
Peeps out. It's like it's coming out in a little place.
Yeah.
There's also a concept of tzitzit roshi. There's a tzitz that the Kohen Gadol wore, which was a head plate. But there's also tzitzit roshi. What's the tzitzit of roshi? It's by my hair. So we already know that tzizit is related to hair. It's not a big mystery. And you're supposed to make these tzizit on the corners of your garment. Kanfei ksuto. Kanaf really means a side. Kanaf is another word for side. So how many sides does a garment have? So people would usually say front and back, in and out. But here we're talking about a four-cornered garment, which was very common in older times. And you're supposed to make these tzizit. The Torah never says what this looks like. It doesn't say it's made out of 4 strings. It's 8 altogether because you double them over. It never tells you how you tie it. All this is halacha l'Moshe Sinai. All this was a received tradition on how you actually do this. Hinei la'avin shoresh inyan mitzvah zu. And he almost always starts with this, to understand the root of this mitzvah. Al pi ma shekatuv bekavanot ha'arizal, as it says, as it's explained in the kavanot of the Arizal, meaning the intents, the Kabbalistic intents of the Arizal. The Kabbalistic intents of the Arizal were collected in a work called Pri Etz Chaim. by Rav Meir Papers. And there he writes like this. Again, this is from the Arizal, but it was collected about 50 years after he passed away. בפרי עץ חיים, שהטלית הוא אור מקיף הגדול, לזה שמקיפו מראשו עד רגלו. Okay, so he starts somewhere else entirely. He's not going to talk about the strings. He's talking about a completely different aspect of tzizit, which is the talit, the talis. What is a talit? Talit is something that you wear over your garments. 100% it has to be over your garments. It's around you. So this is a surrounding light, or makif, for za, for zer and pin. What is zer and pin? Zer and pin is basically what we call the emotional partzuf, the persona of the heart in the person. So these are all the emotions, everything that has to do with habits. This all is zer and pin. Another way of saying it, this is the main representation of who we are, according to Kabbalah. Meaning, if we have 12 different partzufim in the person, we have 12 different personas. So one of the ways of thinking about this is that these personas, they're like representations of different aspects of who we are. Za, zer and pin, is a representation of myself. Above that I have, and myself also has a feminine side to it, called nukva. And then above that I have Abba ve'ima, I have father and mother. They're a representation of my father and mother. And then above that I have what's called Atik and Arich. I have two parts of the crown, which are two different personas. They're called Atik and Arich. Ancient of days and the patient one. And this is a representation of my grandparents. They're all in me. Okay. What does this mean? It means when we say representation, we're not looking at the person himself. We're not saying, oh, the traits of my grandparents are somehow in me. What we're saying is that the faith of my grandparents is also part of me. So I have to understand that each one of these is a representation, not directly of that person, my father and mother, but rather of their faith. Their faith is also in me. And my grandparents' faith is also in me. In any case, here we have something surrounding me, the za. The me here is very tricky, because if you say I, I'm saying me on purpose, because if you say I, then it could be the animal soul. And za is never the animal soul. Za is always the faith. So it has to be the divine soul. So there's something encompassing it. Merosho ad raglo, from its head all the way down to its feet. ולפיכך נקרא טלית, שהוא מספר 10 פעמים מה. And that's why it's called a talit, because another important thing to know is that each one of these personas has a different filling of God's four-letter name associated with it. Za, zer and pin, I'm going to call him Za all the time because it gets too long to say zer and pin. So zer and pin, which means the small face, he is related to the number 45. Okay. His father and mother, they're related to 72 and 63. And his wife, Nukva, is related to 52. That's the general scheme. Atik and Arich are not related to certain fillings of God's name. In any case, so he is related to 45. Why 45? 45 is the value of Adam. It's the value of man. So within all these personas, the Za is the one that's most related to being like man, like the one who I am, the man in me. So he says, Talit is equal to how much? If you do it quickly. No, so Tet is 9, and Lamed is 30, and Yud is 10, so we have 49 already. And the Taf at the end is 400, so we have 449. So that's very conveniently if you add 1, and the 1 is added many times because there's something that has to tie the letters together. 450. What is that? 10 times 45. So the Talit, you understand, is like a 10 times 45. It's like 10 surrounding lights around Za, who is related to 45. The Arizal has a lot of this. I said the beginning is going to be Kabbalah. It's going to be very detached from regular speech. Shebchinat eser sfirot dezah. So the talit has to cover all 10 sfirot, all 10 aspects of zah. והציצית הם בחינת מקיף החוזר. Now, on the talis, on the four corners, yeah, of zah. Now, the tzizit, what you tie, the fringes, all of them, yeah, all 10, from the keter all the way down to malchus. והציצית הם בחינת מקיף החוזר. And the tzitzis are what we call the reflected surrounding light. What is that? It's a new concept. Makif v'chozer. Rotze lomar, so he explains, he says, what I mean to say is, ממוחין דאבא ואימא, המתלבשים בזה, להיות לא מוחין בבחינת אור פנימי בגר שבו. ואחר כך על ידי הקעת קוצי דסארי דארי חנפין התלוין עד רישא דזה בעורפו נגד המצח שלו, שהוא מכה במוחין דזה ומוציא הערתם לחוץ, ונקרא מקיף החוזר. ומבחינת שערות ונמשכים עד רישא דנוקבה, שהתחלתה מן החזה דזה ולמטה, ושם הם נקראים הציצית. It's a mouthful. We'll get to it. He's going to explain what these words mean. In short, he's saying this is not something that's directly from the makif of zah. This came from a reflected light, that the father and mother partzufim are reflecting something from the crown, and it appears here as fringes. Okay, we'll get into exactly what that means and why. Again, all this imagery is Kabbalistic imagery. It's very vague in the beginning, but as you begin to understand the language, you'll see that it's actually pretty specific. מה שאין כן למעלה, הם נבלעים במקיף הגדול שהוא הטלית, but above, so we said that tzizit means to peep out. So this reflected light is peeping out at the fringes, at the ends, at the edges. But above that, there's so much light that you don't see it. You don't see this light from the father, from the keter, from the crown, that was reflected by the father and mother. In other words, if I would have to say it psychologically in half a word, you would say something like, my father and mother reflect something from my grandparents' faith. They do reflect something. And at the fringes, when you test my mother and father, and when life tests them, and they have these challenges, then you'll see the glimmer of the faith of my grandparents. I always use these explanations because otherwise people are completely lost. It's not the only explanation. There's many ways to say it, but this gives you some idea. Well, what does it mean that something is reflected? Meaning that my parents reflect something from what my grandparents were. Okay. ומן החזה ולמטה הם ניכרים. And from the chest and down, they are revealed. Whose chest? From the chest of Zah. From the chest of, what's a chest? So obviously Zah is not a person. He doesn't have a body. It's a representation. It's a spiritual thing. So when we say that's just chest, what we mean in Kabbalistic language is that the body is divided into three parts: the head, the chest, and the feet. The head represents the intellectual faculties, Chokhmah, Bina, and Das. The chest represents the emotional faculties, Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferes. And the feet represent the habitual faculties, which are Netzach, Hod, Yesod. That's the general thing. So when he says chest, kidneys is part of the feet. It's a different representation within the lower third. Okay, it's a more inner representation. It's the moichin of the lower third. Maybe we'll get to that here. I don't remember if he discusses this here. But the general thing is to look at the person externally. And then you say he has a head, he has a torso, he has feet. That's the general description of every person. You look at yourself, that's how you're built. Your head is one thing, your torso is the next thing, after that it's your feet. So when he says chest, he means the chagat, chesed, gvura, tiferes. Again, this is how you speak in Kabbalah. It's all very, because there's so many details. It's not poetic. It's because there's so many details. So there's a lot of abbreviations. There's just abbreviations or different words for it. I imagine that if I was working in a car shop, right, fixing engines, there's so many parts to the engines. that I'd have a language like this. In anything that's very technical, and you have to discuss a lot of details quickly, you develop a jargon that is mostly impossible to understand for someone coming from the outside, and it has a lot of synonyms. You can call it this, you can call it that, everybody knows what you mean, there's no problem. This is how it is in Kabbalah also. Velemata im nikarim, and they stick out on the bottom, kisham hu gam ken makom giluy chasadim, because that is another one of the places where the loving kindness, the aspects of loving kindness are revealed. Validem nasu levanim umeirim el nukva deza, and then their purpose then is to provide energy, to give energy to Zah's female aspect. We said that he has a female aspect, nukva, and so that receives through these fringes that come out, that stick out. And that's why the tzitzits themselves, the strings themselves, are called tashmishei mitzvah. They are something that is used to perform the mitzvah, because the garment itself is a garment. That's not the mitzvah. And you add the fringes to the garment. So the fringes are not the mitzvah itself, because each one doesn't stand by itself. You have to have all four. So they have a status of being tashmishei mitzvah, that they are the cause or the something that makes the mitzvah happen. I wonder how they translate. Probably, wonder if they even translated tashmishei mitzvah. Let's see. The artifact. Yeah, it could be. Where is it? Yeah, here. They called it articles associated with the mitzvah. Pretty close. Yeah. Okay. ולכן הקים את ועוד שם עניין תכלת לבן וציץ וציצית כמו שהתבאר בעזרת השם דברך, and there in Pri Etz Chaim he also discusses why there is a blue string and why there's white strings and what they signify, and the connection to the tzitz. We said it's the same word as tzizit. The tzitz was a head plate that the Kohen Gadol wore. Okay, so this is the introduction. The introduction is, like we said, you have to know the jargon, you have to know what it's talking about. The most important thing for us is this concept of surrounding light, Or HaMakif. Why is Or HaMakif so important? No, his tzitzit is mashpia on his wife.
Is what?
On his wife. Nukva is like his wife. It's not that the nukva is the wife. It's not that the wife is the nukva. We said it's within the person himself. It's the female aspect within the person himself. Great. So, Bezrat Hashem, after this Tvilat Esh, I know I say Tvilat Esh is like a trial by fire, then God willing on Sunday we'll continue and we'll start seeing what he says about this. Okay? So, you should probably read it in English. If you read it in English, you'll feel that you can swim at least. You can,